All right, everybody, bear with me on pronunciations and reading and stuff, and stopping to look up words because there's lots of words to look up. Lots of words. All right, Lacan's position. So rather than resulting from the contingent fact, the frailties of man's organism, um, wildness is a permanent virtuality of a gap opened up his essence, and far from being an insult to freedom, wildness is freedom's most faithful companion, following its very move like a shadow. Not only can man's being not be understood without. Now, when I say wild, I'm gonna say it one more time. Every time I say wild, it's madness, but that's. But it would not be man's being if it did not bear wildness within itself as a limit of his freedom. The weak organism, a deranged imagination, and conflicts beyond one's capacities do not suffice to cause wildness. Jacques Lacan's The Essential Causality of Wildness. Well, it's the M word. Few men are as contested as Lacan. Is it parody? Wait,
Yes.
yeah, parodying the expression. It might be said that among psychiatrists, Lacan was. Well, there's one. Lacan has supporters, and he has advisories.
Adversaries.
This was going to say. It would be further necessary to add that these adversaries by far outweighed the supporters, and logicians, logicians of wildness, which is the M word, does not seem specifically bothered by this. Lukashin, Logician, I'm going to look it up just to make sure I'm saying it, but I think it's Logician.
I think it's logician, yeah.
Logician. Let's find out. Oh my gosh. Logician.
Logician.
Logician. The person who studies or is highly skilled in the principle of logic. Logician. Okay. Although semantically unexpected, this coupling expresses a certain reality. Personally, where I too define Lacan's position, I would call it an unremitting defense of the nobility rights of wildness. In trying to determine the site of Lacanian's thinking, it seemed interesting to me, first, to gather the governing ideas of his dissertation. Two elements appeared important in Lacan's analysis of personalities. These are A, the relations of comprehension that he inherits from Jaspers, and B, intentionality. A, relations of comprehension, a criteria of psychological and pathological analysis. These relations represent the common measure of human feelings and act liable to being grasped with reference to the participationist interpretation. B, intentionality, rendering through intentional phenomenon. Intentionality discloses the development of the person in each of its manifestations. What is important in Lacan's dissertation is the assumption of the characteristics that he includes in his definition. A, biological development and relations of comprehension to be read in them. B, the conception of oneself, ego ideal. C, a certain tension pertaining to social relations. Ego other. So ego ideal is you, ego other I think is others. I'm not sure. Lacan, we shall see, has held to this general framework. Not approved. Of course not. It seems to me that the essential value of Lacan's work resides in the definition he gives of desire. It turns desire into a cycle of behavior characterized by certain general organic oscillations, which are qualified as affective, a more or less directed directed motor agitation, and fantasies whose objective intentionality will be more or less adequate depending upon the case. When a vital experience, given active or endured, determines effective equilibrium, motor rest, and vanishing of fantasies, we say by definition that desire has been satisfied, and that this experience has was the end and object of the desire. In the detailed analysis that he gives in the case of Amin, Leconte appears to conceive psychosis as a cycle of behavior, such that the point is not to be undertaken a symptomatic study of psychosis like Krempelin or Blaneri, but instead on the basis of Jasper's relations of comprehension to grasp the organizing mechanism of desire and its satisfaction. To my mind, Leconte's thoughts bears the influence of Pulhan's work, Socialization, and the rest is in French, which moreover he does not cite. In effect, the vital experience in which the end of desire is recognized is essentially social in its origins, exercise, and meaning. So, to recognize in morbid symptoms one or several cycles of behavior that an anomalous as they are show a concrete tendency that may be defined as relations of comprehension, such as the viewpoint that we take to study of the psychosis. I mentioned earlier a considerable importance of Leconte's attributes to the social instance. Indeed, he expresses this in the four functions that he recognizes in a personality under the attributes of a comprehensibility of development, the idealism of one's self-conception, and lastly, as the very function of the social tensions of personality, in which the first two attributes to the phenomenon are actually engendered. Leconte places the postulates and psychogenetic determinism at the basis of his doctrine. This postulate makes possible a science of personality. The object of this science is the genetic study of the intentional functions into which human relations of a social type are integrated. It is what he calls the phenomenology of personality. Applying this method to the paranoid psychosis of self-punishment, Leconte reveals his status as a phenomenon of the personality in a development of the delusion coherent with the living history of the subject in the character of manifestations, at once conscious delusions and unconscious self-punishing tendencies of the ego ideal by its dependency on psychic tension specific to social relations, tensions expressed immediately both in the phenomenon and content of delusion and in its etiology and reactive outcome. Alongside this phenomenological manifestation of psychosis, we can, with Leconte, single out three sub-characters, which are moreover very important. One, a humanly comprehensible meaning. Two, virtualities of dialectical process, and cure being catharsized. A cure that for the subject represents the liberation, catharsis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Liberation from the conception of oneself and the world. Illusory in that it depends on unknowing affective drives, and this liberation is accomplished through the shock with reality. One noteworthy fact being that spontaneous catharsis is not entirely conscious, and three, its opening onto social participation. The social category of human reality to which I personally attach so much importance is one to which Leconte has been attentive. He reprises the discoveries of the ethno-sociology of projection as illustrated by Massu and Lévi-Brulé, and describes the phenomenon of representation, mandatement. Some images, he says, stars in films, newspapers, sports, represents the necessities of dramatic space, a space, I can't say that, and of moral communion specific to human personality. They are liable to compensate for the orgastic of universalist religious or purely social rights that have represented these necessities hitherto. After giving the lie to the notion of constitution, which he considers absolutely maniacal, Lacan tackles the restrictive point of view of his work.
Sorry, it was mythical.
It was what?
He considered it absolutely mythical.
Okay. Delusion becomes an intentional equivalent and of an inefficiently socialized aggressive drive. But it is interesting to discover here the concrete tendencies subjacent to the intentional phenomenon of delusion, calling for Jaspers. Lacan distinguishes between A, the delusion that is manifest as the development of the personality, and B, the delusion that is presented as an eruptive psychic process that disrupts and rearranges the personality. Only an examination of the personality genetics and structural continuity will shed light on cases of delusion in which the psychic process and not a developmental process is at issue. That is to say, the case in which one ought to recognize the intentional manifestations of a drive that is not of infantile origins, but instead it is of recent acquisition and exogenous. We're gonna look that word up. Excuse me. Come on. Delete. There we go.
Exogenous.
Okay. Exogenous. Anything that originates, develops, or is caused by factors outside a specific system, organism, or context. Exogenous, and is such that, in effect, certain affections, such as lethargic, oh my gosh, encephalitis, makes its existence seen by demonstrating to us the primitive phenomenon. After dismissing the Tainane, which I'm going to look up, perilous solution. We're going to look up to see what that is anyways. Oh, is it a city? It says it's a city in Taiwan. Perilous solution. Huh. Of the personality, Lacan proposes a definition of delusion. Quote, it is the expression within forms of language formed for understandable relations in a group of concrete tendencies in which the subject misjudges their insufficient conformism to the necessity of the group. As we will see, this phenomenon of misjudging subtends the Lacanian edifice in his critical argument concerning organodynamism. Lacan raises this question: does the originality of our object, wildness, pertain to social practice or to scientific reasons? Lacan seeks out the response on both of these planes. IY encountered delusions as part of his structural analysis of wildness. He views the latter as the sort of deficiency that the English call loss of control. This is a delusional intuition on the basis of which the delusion belief takes effect. For Lacan, delusional belief is ignorance. In my view, we can situate Lacan's logic reversal of the scientific attitude of this at this level. By tackling the human value of wildness, Lacan moves from the plane of causality to that of motivation, setting out from knowledge and belief. He considers wildness from a subjectivist perspective. Wildness, he says, is lived within the register of meaning and its metaphysical impact is revealed in that the phenomenon of wildness is not separable from the problem of meaning from being in general, that is to say, a language of human beings. I would have liked to have written at length here about the Lacanian theory of language. This would risk taking us further away from the topic. Nevertheless, upon reflection, we ought to recognize that every delusional phenomenon is ultimately expressed, that is to say, spoken. Thus, the best way to analyzing a delusion or a phenomenal psychic process is still to squarely face the making explicit of that delusion. Drawing a parallel between EY and Lacan is difficult for the good reason that the latter aimed above all to produce a logic of delusional facts. Madness, Lacan says, is neither more or less than a stasis of being. The wild man faces the disorder of the world, which is a disorder of his own consciousness. Transitivism. What? Yeah. Wants to establish the law of his heart. So, two solutions remains possible. Either we break the circle through outward violence, or else he strikes a blow to himself by way of social after effect. Such is the general formula of wildness. It applies to anyone who of those phrases whereby is accomplished more or less in each destiny the dialectical development of the human being, and it is always accomplished as a stasis of being. The law of the heart that the wild person wants to impose is the price of freedom. The wild person is no longer, and I'm going to say this once, insane person. Okay, but one who has accepted to inventory all the abysses that freedom offers by making delusions the contingent effect of a lack of control, of a deficient, i.e., EY goes right by the problem, and correlatively is its solution. The perpetrator of a crime of passion is not deficient, since he is adjudged responsibility. The act has a meaning. The medical jurisprudence will clarify through its practice. Therefore, phenomenologically, the deficiency is unacceptable. In closing, I would like to recall the broad outline of psychogenesis as Lacan conceives it, invoking an explicit Jungian, it's a Jungian position. Lacan goes beyond the concept of imago, turning the phenomenon of projection, which Lévi-Breuil presents as an index of a primitive mentality, into the cornerstone of his system. He ties the unhappy unconsciousness to the magic consciousness. Internally, then, Lacan seems to be the point of encounter between Hegel and Lévi-Breuil, where with Jung the image was the projection and the object of a conflictual subjective state, or a second side of an ideal. With Lacan, it becomes the fellow human. It in its human generality for the adult, and its intoxicated ingenuity for the child. The author grounds the history of psychic life in the mirror phase. Within the phrase, two instances join up: the primordial ego, which is ontologically unstable, and the existential complex engaged in a struggle in which Freud perfectly distinguished the death instinct. At the start of psychic development, the primordial ego, as essentially alienated, is tied with the primitive sacrifice as essentially suicidal. Thus Lacan says, There is an essential discordance within human reality. And even if the organic conditions of intoxication are prevalent, the consent of freedom would still be necessary. The fact that wildness manifests itself among humans only after the age of reason clearly verifies the Pascalian. We're going to look this word up.
Pascalian. It was in Pascal.
Yeah, Pascalian institution that, quote, a child is not a man. What are we to conclude from these few considerations? And besides, is it even necessary to do so? Would it not be better to leave open a discussion that involves the very limits of freedom that is easy to say of humanity's responsibility? In closing, I would like to speak about the new tendencies in human sciences, psychosomatic medicine. This science, bolstered by the fundamental ambiguity existing within the nervous system, convinced that the sympathetic system, in fact, represents the real frontier. That is to say, the effective plan of action between the organic and the functional purpose to go beyond the imposition, liaison, disorder and functional disorder towards the unitary perspective of the ill person. Defenders of this theory base themselves on antomorphologically. We're going to look that whole word up. I tried it. I'm going to try again. Antomophysiologically.
Physiological. Antomophysiological. But let's look it up.
I am not stopping. It just takes a while to spell it. It just gave me a Wikipedia dictionary. Pertains to the integrated studies of both the physical structures and the biological organism, anatomy, and how those structures dynamically function physiology. In this combined approach, form is explicitly linked to functions, meaning the physical shape of a body part dictates its operational purpose. In particularly, psychopathological data. Functional impairment is a transitory disturbance, a temporary automatical. Antometical. Hold on. How do you say it?
And I think it's anatomical. Having to do with anatomy.
Let's look it up. That figures.
Question.
It's anatomical.
259.
It's anatomical. Anatomical. Relating to a physical structure and organization of organisms, including human, animals, and plants. Anatomical modifications detectable with histochemical techniques. Reversible, liable to a French word, but is also capable through its repetition and through multiple transitions to lead to a lesion. The organic lesion is a definitive alteration. It is a constant evolution, often irreversible, and maintains itself in a sort of vicious cycle. Functional disturbances is liable to lead to a lesion. There is no illness of an organ, but of the entire organism. It is a morbid unity in a somatic unity. From these first elements, the following observations can be made. 1. The most localized visceral disease can have a psychic impact. 2. Mental diseases can have visceral or somatic repercussions and manifestations. And 3, lastly, psychic causes can trigger and foster alone the most authentic visceral diseases. We see what such facts apply, but the authors clarify their position to the utmost. From the gastric ulcer to the psychic organ of emotional impotence, including diasymphylic schizophrenia. Just going to look at this word real quick. Diasymphylic. Can't say it. Tried it. DNCEPH. There it is.
The last part is phallic, so I know that much.
It's not gonna let me. It's gonna make me do a video. And we want to play a game called the GTO Game of Thrones. Dragon. Sorry. Diencephalic. Anything related to or involving the diacephylena. Diacephylactic. Schizophrenia. And the progression is continuous. One of the unquestionable interests in this new orientation of medicine is its resolute bearing on the very core of human conflict, developing Jungian conclusion to the extreme. This current is proof of the possibility of a medicine of the person. This doctrine could be reproached for its esoteric character. Likewise, with psychoanalysis, the singular colloquium risk take the aspect of a confession, but is not very consultation, inevitability of a confession. Is it not therefore a call, as Professor P. Savy has said, and is the appeasement that the doctor brings to ulcerous pain?
Ulcerous.
Thank you. By prescribing bismuth, very different from that which he brings to muddled and dazed minds, as only our civilization can produce them, by strengthening the very basis of psychic syntheses. One ought above all not believe that this is a modified psychoanalysis. The author is resolutely opposed to psychoanalysis, to the work of analytical dissection. They contrast the more aesthetic work of syntheses. Psychoanalysis entails a pessimistic view of humanity. The medicine of the person presents itself as a deliberate choice for optimism in the face of human reality. Conclusion. We're on the conclusion. Oh, someone's here. 1. The mental disorder described in spinocerebellar and degeneration are in their order of frequency the following: A. Mental slowing down in all its forms. B. Character disorder with their instinctive perversion. And C. Certain delusions, notably of persecutions. Here I have presented a case of delusion from possession involving a wild structure. I have been unable to find any similar cases in the literature. 2. A single problem raised here was that of the relations between neurological and psychiatric disorder, without the solution having been provided. But this work has put into question the hypotheses of mechanisms and of dynamism in neurology. Soquet presents 3 hypotheses. A. The medullary cerebellary lesions are the cause of mental disorders. B. That there is a merely simple coincidence between these 2 orders of phenomenon. And C. That among these patients an evident predisposition exists, and the lesions of the cerebral cortex results from the associated process. The study of this observation permits of 2 conclusions. mental disturbance and mental slowing down. The psychological immaturation observed in spinocerebellar and degeneration are related to the diffuse autonomous. I can't say this in. I only said it once. I can't say it again. What the hell?
Anatomical.
Can't say it either. Where did it go? There it is. There we go. Anatomical lesions and this clinical clusters. By contrast, systemized delusions, hysterical manifestations, and neurotic behaviors must be considered reactional conducts of an ego at odds with intersocial relations. However, from the organodynamist viewpoint, it would be necessary to account for disorders of conceptives, sensibilities that in the course of delusional experiences are able to draw the delusion of this or that structure. End of that chapter. Lots of notes. Lots of notes. Let's get past the notes. There's over 100 notes. All right, 2. Letter of Marcus Disponi. What? Okay. My dear Despinoy, a win, a rather slight one, but a win all the same. I am an HP psychiatric hospital doctor, and a few hours after the result, I applied for a position in Guadalupe. The position is not available until December. As for Martinique, there can be no question of it. There has been no news from M. Blanchard, so I am rather annoyed. The minister sent me the list of available positions. Blenda, Pontorson, Elric, Lenameze, Axi and Providence, Ouch, in Rhines. I am rather annoyed since I will have to delay the studies I have begun. I have met someone named Dell who passed the competitive exam. He is the brother of your Dell. I handed him your letter. He will write to you. In any case, if the second position cannot be created in Martinique, at least there is Guadalupe. Nueve Angeles passed the exam and wants to go there. I am at a slight disadvantage. I placed 13 out of 23. At least 8 people, if we accept those who will not take up a position, will choose ahead of me. That is obviously depressing. This morning, Josie is taking her Latin philology exam, and I am taking my sociology exam this afternoon. I haven't gone into the curriculum, incidentally, but I have paid the enrollment fee, so I will return to St. Albans tomorrow morning. Sincerely. That was a letter. 3. Trait d'Union. France Fanon's editorial from the Ward Generals. Trait d'Union of St. Albans Psychiatric Hospital, December 1952, March 1953. 19th December 1952. Number 127, wariness. The slightest conversation with the patient often invokes sentences or expressions such as, I am tired, I have no taste for anything, I am wary, I am lazy. If I listened to myself, I would stay all the time in bed. I would stay all the time in bed. Talking tires me. I wish I could stay in the corner without moving. At other times, none of this is expressed, but in each department, do we not know? Women and men always isolated, not speaking to anyone, who seem to be examples of people for whom any effort, any speech, every gesture is a mountain to climb. A contemporary philosopher, unfortunately not a psychiatrist, has voiced a sentence which I believe is of some interest to us. Quote, if you want to go deeper into the structure of a particular country, you have to visit its psychiatric hospitals. End quote. And certainly, it must be admitted, is there not in the world of today a wave of carelessness, of indifference, of letting go? When we talk to people, do we not discover exhaustion quickly enough? If we question ourselves, we see that all these correspond to a renunciation. When a head of government finds that the opposition is too strong or that he cannot solve according to the wishes of the country, currently problems that he has no longer at the summit of life, he resigns, feels weary, tired, disillusioned, desperate. Living is not just eating and drinking, or is it at least eating and drinking, and then after that a lot of other things? Whoever gives up wants only food and drink. He who gives up totally does not even want to eat or drink. To be tired, to be weary, is not only to be tired and weary of others, but above all, of oneself. Dr. Fanon, Part 2, 26 December 1952. Can you tell it's been translated in like UK English because of how they set up the dates? We must not confuse weariness with rest. No more weariness with idleness. Weariness is a refusal to continue. We have been able to start. We have even gone quite far towards carrying out the act. But there now arises this immense weight in the arms, this unusual heaviness in the legs, this unusual void in the head, and above all, this anguish that harrows our breasts. We must try to live, said Verily. Let us say we must try to continue. If at 40, and it must be said, it is especially at 40 that it appears this desire is born in me to do nothing more, or more exactly, if at 40, I realize when I wake up one morning that I no longer have the taste for anything. What must be understood? I do not want to give an explanation that is valid for everyone, but often I think that it looks this way. For 10 or 14 years, I lived like that, without worry because I was convinced that something was going to happen. Perhaps I will be told that I was at least worried about that, but I was not even waiting for it. I was expecting a lot of things from it. I did not do anything to know what it was. I did not do anything to provoke or facilitate what I was waiting for. Like the little indigenous in the Renell films, can't say the word, who waits for his father for the whole day in the face of all evidence that his father has deliberately forgotten him. Well, at 40, I am a forgotten person. A world has not responded to my expectations. The world has not come to kiss me on the forehead or caress my cheek. That is it. Alas, no, I have not been forgotten. It is I who have forgotten. And when I say at 40 that I am weary of working or suffering or being unhappy, on the contrary, I must understand that I am tired of having waited like those friends whom one expects 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and then damn it, you don't wait for them anymore. In one sense, being weary at 40 is saying damn to the world, to others, to life, to oneself. Damn, damn, damn. To everyone. Damn to those who want to be nice to me. Damn to those who don't like me. Damn. Besides, I am weary. I am tired. Dr. Fernand. To be continued. To be continued. 30th January 1953. The human being faced with things. Yeah, it's us three now. In the world, there are objects, trees, fields, cars, planes. In the world, there are things. The individual who looks at these objects, these things can remain indifferent to them. We can also desire them. We want to desire a car, is to want to have the desire for a car no longer. To desire something is to want to desire it no longer. It is usually is usually said that desire sees further than things desired. The desired thing is always a limit. A change of plane transpires when a person is put in place of a thing. Every person belongs to an institution, is embodied in a framework. If he's a military man, he'll be an officer or a private. He can be a stonemason, an entrepreneur, or a peasant. Such a man is married or single. He has children, or does not like reading, or cinema, or dominoes. When we meet a person, a certain timidity nearly always arises. A new farmer comes to a farm. Others look at him from afar at first, before drawing nearer to him. Someone then says good day to him. At noon, the social act at eating and drinking. You might say work to unite tongues, untie tongues. But at the start, they respect each other. Take each other's measure by looking. Whenever you meet a new person, you speak. You can only speak. Language is what breaks the silence. And the silence, then you can communicate or commune with this person. The neighbor, in the Christian sense, is always an accomplice who can betray, as with any accomplice. To fall out with someone is to realize that you have nothing in common. To commune with means to commune faced with something. An intention forms the basis of all communications, but this intention must be sincere. In order to discover the desire that sincerity, a distinction must be made between the world and the sum of objects to be found on the earth. Faced with objects, we act differently than when we are faced with other people. We eat in order to eat. We breathe in order to breathe. This doing, we live. We eat or breathe sincerely. To live is a kind of sincerity. It ought not be said that eating or drinking or smoking is not living. We must not scorn what is referred to as the quote every day. There is no need always to be on the search for the unusual. Creative intentions can emerge from out of the common. But I will come back to this another day. On Saturday morning at the newspaper meeting, we talked a bit about sleep. The doctor Tosquelles reminds us that many patients ask for sleeping medications. This difficulty is getting to sleep. It's called insomnia. What is insomnia? Insomnia is a way of life that likes to think it is ordinary, it is justified. We stay awake when there is a reason to stay awake. The ordinary man is able to suspend his wakefulness. His sincerity is such that he possesses the freedom to be suspended. The insomniac does not have this freedom to sleep, to relax, to doze. The insomniac does not stay awake. It's the night that stays awake. It stays awake. 6 March 1953. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. For a person and a country alike, one of the most difficult things is to keep all three constituents of time in view, past, present, and future. Bearing these three constituents in mind amounts to recognizing the great importance in waiting, in hope, in the future. It means knowing that the acts we performed yesterday can have consequences in 10 years. Time, and that we might therefore have to justify these acts. Memory is therefore required, and with humans, memory is often the mother of tradition. Now, if it is good to have a tradition, it is also agreeable to be able to go beyond that tradition and invent a new mode of living. Someone who considers that the present is worthless and that our sole interest lies with the past is, in a sense, a person who is lacking 2 dimensions and on whom you cannot count. Someone who deems that you must live with all your might in the here and now, and that you do not have to worry about tomorrow or yesterday, can be dangerous, since he believes that each minute is is severed from the, each minute is severed from the minutes that follow or precede it, and that he is the only person on this planet, someone who turns away from the past and the present, who dreams of the distant future, both desirable and desired, is also deprived of the opposite everyday terrain on which one must act to accomplish the future sought for. You thus see that a person always has to take into account the present, past, and future. If we ask someone in the hospital, when did you become ill? And he tells us, I cannot recall. We say that this person is trying to forget bad memories, illness, being without his parents, and behaves as if the past were dead. If we ask someone, a patient, what day is it today? And he replies, I know neither the day, the month, nor the year. We should say to ourselves that this patient has lost all interest in the world and acts as if he were dead. Similarly, if the patient takes leave of himself and makes no effort to get better, to understand his troubles, to fight against the illness affecting him, if this patient does not attempt to criticize his own attitude, his own ideas, we should think that this patient is no longer interested in the true life that is in society, that he has already accepted that he is going to remain ill his entire life. The past, present, and future must comprise human beings. Three predominant interests. It is impossible to see and achieve anything positive, valid, and lasting without taking all three elements into account. 27th March, 1953. The therapeutic role of engagement. One thing is very important in the domain of psychiatry. I mean here that the constant concern to refer as patients every word, every act, and every facial expression to the illness affecting him or her. Each gesture, each word, each facial expression must be referred to the affection that from which the patient is suffering, to the current stage of the illness, to the emergence or not of chronicity. But if this is important in psychiatry, the second question then arises: who is apt to register these modifications, these fluctuations, these changes, these mutations? A priori, it must be said that the patient is rarely in the position to undertake his own observation on his own, given that he suffers from this disease as much as he lives it. However, were it possible for him, materially and organically possible, he would like to say to his doctor or orderly, I'm going to become agitated. My hallucinations are going to start up again. My insomnia is coming back. I'm beginning to anxious. Just as someone who has a stomach ulcer in spring will go to see his doctor to resume his diet. The catatonic, upon feeling the return of his inertia, his disinterest, his mutus, would, if he was not abominably united with the rigidity of the body we call Cantonian, with the substantialized body, with the body that strives only to be a body, of course, says to us, quote, do something so that I do not become catatonic again. But then, if neither the doctor nor the orderly stands in this role as vigilant guardians for the patient, then it may happen that in his vigilance against catatonia, it's catatonic, but with the patient's angry act comes to be labeled by the orderly as a nasty reaction. The patient is irksome, disagreeable. I often get an orderly to tell me about this or that patient. The replies she gives are always vague. I get the impression that the orderly does not ever consider the patient that is to be looked after and treated. There is no psychotherapeutic tension. You must say, I am not addressing a reproach to the ward orderlies here. Instead, since I am in fact in charge of first stage professional training, I am suggesting a technique for performing the job well. If you want to carry out your job perfectly as an orderly, you must try to take note of two things in your ward. The signs indicating that this patient is getting better. The signs indicating that this patient will relapse or develop towards chronicity. chronicity. But above all, a piece of advice: never concede that the patient is definitely chronic, or by considering a patient to be a chronic case, you are no longer heeding the activity of psychotherapy. I even think, but this issue exceeds my prerogatives, that the orderlies ought not to be left too long in a hospital's so-called chronic services, since they lose the vigilance that is the fundamental feature of modern orderly. That one's done. Chapter it's not chapter 4. 4. One on some cases treated by the benign method. All right. Francois and Frantz Fanon, St. Albans, July 1953. We would like to put for our consideration a criticism of some concrete cases of psychiatric therapy in which organotherapy and psychotherapy, with everything that is most authentical and most complementary about them, together combined in a coherent and effective ensemble. Are you guys still with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, cool. Okay. The point here is to situate annihilation therapy through repeated shocks within the institutional therapeutic performance. Our experiment involves cases of serious neurosis or of chronic delusions, psychosis with a strong pathoplastic charge. Setting out from some favorable facts, the theoretical orientations of which remain highly datable. The intention here is to go beyond the stereotype framework of what, in the psychiatric literature, has become a commonplace devoid of practical significance, namely the precise appeal that is made to so-called complementary psychotherapies or ergotherapies. Let's go look that word up. That's a new one.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's ergotherapies, but I don't know what it means.
Yes, you do. A healthcare professional focusing on helping people of all ages regain the development skills needed for daily living, work, or leisure, which are to be established either what? I guess either consecutively or in parallel with classical organotherapies, electric shock, insulin. What is that one? Leucotomy?
Leucotomy.
Yeah, leucotomy, etc. Among the 9 cases that we have treated using electroconvulsive therapy over the last 3 years, all with some efficacy, if not total success, we will dwell on the more elaborate descriptions of an exemplary case and reserve another paper for the problem of the legitimacy of a very limited indication of the annihilation method within the framework of institutional therapies. The case that concerns us here was not the first in date among those making up our experiences with electroconvulsive therapy. One of the present authors, after a series of attempts, a trial and error, was able to work through a completion of million on the therapy of 2 desperate cases. However, here is the first case in which the coherent set of therapeutic conducts that we are suggesting was applied in complete knowledge of the fact and in line with the preconceived plan. and other cases are largely superposable into it. Dr. Velat of Limoges entrusted us with a patient of 45 years of age, a nun, who for several months had present, he says, serious mental disorders characterized by some delusional ideas of persecution, serious behavioral problems manifesting in raucous cries,
Fracas.
screaming at any time and in any place, in the house, outside, at church. She presents alternate and intermittent diurnal and nocturnal psychomotor agitation, sometimes with completely incoherent but short-lived delusions. In addition, she is readily aggressive to persons of her entourage. Her mental disorders already outstanding and involving making her retention in the psychiatric hospital indispensable, etc. This sister arrived in our unit, accompanied by only one of her companions. At the first meeting, we had to foil the well-meaning ruse that her community had devised. The patient, lucid, synthetic, and unwilling, had not the slightest awareness of her disease and refusal all psychiatric examinations, which she deemed incompatible with the respect owed to her condition as a nun and to her responsibilities. The plan was thus to trick her by putting her in the ward for acute sufferers, monitoring her closely to prevent her escape, and divesting her and her religious habits during her sleep. Her companion was to wait until nighttime before leaving, at the risk of being misunderstood and making the most of the voluntary character of the placement. We refused to admit the patient without a first explanatory session, together with the accompanying sister. During this interview, it was partially possible to overcome the patient's reluctance and to get her to recognize the appropriateness of her placement in an observational clinic, thus facilitating her to turn up in the ward dressed in civilian clothes from the outset. That naturally included the right to go on extra hospital outings outside of examination and treatment hours and the observance of the ward rules and regulation. However, the patient took up our offer more because she does not argue against the orders of her superiors than out of a real understanding of her situation. The first interviews confirmed our initial impressions of a strong paranoid personality, but we were unable to conquer her absolute synthetic, recessant, retexance. Ooh, I don't know that word.
Reticence.
I got it right. Cool. Proper verbal contact was possible when she was asked about practical questions concerning life at the hospital. However, the most total silence surrounded any attempt to get information about her personal, familial, or community life. During this period, we were unable to obtain any delusional confessions from her or any indication that would explain her strange behavior. She showed us resistance to physical examinations, which, it goes without saying, did not reveal any disorders. She spent her days walking in the garden or outside the hospital in the chapel. She read a lot. She did not make any friends and fled from other patients. I refused to have anything to do with these girls from up there, she told us frankly. However, with much patience, we gleaned from her that she was busy in her room making dresses of her dolls. She was nevertheless courteous in greeting the club committee members, who in this ward always come to visit the new arrivals. She accepted her gift and wishes, but avoided all collaboration, though not without excusing herself. Her demeanor reflects the psychorigidity of hypertonia of the ego. Let's find out what that means. What are you laughing at? What is Lynn laughing at? Lynn just laughs out of nowhere. Medical condition characterized by abnormally high muscle tone, causing a muscles to remain stiff, rigid. Hold on a second. Hypertonia of the ego. Real screams develop from simple scrapings of the throat, exaggerated and repeated with gradual increasing intensity. They peppered her speech or interrupted her silence. They did not seem to represent an anti-hallucinatory defense or response to a delusional attitude. They emerged without any external manifestations of anxiety, but also without her considering them as foreign to her ego. She attempted successfully to minimize the pathological meanings of this behavior. However, it is not difficult to observe the character of these screams as scornful for her neighbors, for the people she came across, or for the doctor, above all when she was faced with an awkward question that he may ask her. The acumen of the sisters' orderlies came up against the same systematology involving refusal. During this period, we received some complementary pieces of information, the most important of which were a brother of hers had committed suicide, probably close to the onset of schizophrenic processes. Her father died with a syndrome of mental weaknesses involving undeterminate neurological disturbances. A sister of hers had committality. That's a weird word. What? What? You can't say it, can you? You're breathing hard. Oh, whatever. Okay. Or compulsive hysteria. Oops. The patient always maintained a very proud character, self-taught and very close to her dead brother. She then entered a convent where she always proved very difficult to handle, sent on a mission in Libreville, where she had to be removed by her superiors shortly afterward because of her violent and scornful behavior towards indigenous people, and especially towards the children. When speaking to her about these difficulties, she spoke invasively of the aridity. Okay. Aridity. Say it.
Aridity, as in arid.
A long-term climatic state of an area lacking enough moisture or support normal vegetation of the climate, while letting it slip that black people were naked and that she never lowered herself to their level and their dirty ways of living. When then formed, well, she's fucking racist, and then formed in our opinion, we were dealing with a genuine paranoia, the development of a personality in which hysterical conversations disorders were established secondarily. Some narco-analysis sessions in which we adopted a passive attitude provoking neither further change nor did they open into other psychotherapies. Once we had arrived, hey John, once we had verified the social impossibilities and readaptation outside the convenience in her family, we decided to submit the patient to convulsive therapy in line with the following design. First stage, one of us quickly undertook some active intervention, psychotherapy, which aimed to unveiling to the patient the meanings of her conduct and the psychological interpretations of her behavior as a whole. The psychotherapist converted the neurosis session into frank discussions, almost aggressive ones, about her character and her life. Her defense wore down in part, and though she protested about the violation of her personality, my soul or my subconscious belonged to God only. She admitted her poor character and her arrogance, as well as her decision to live in isolation, to be sufficient. As was to anticipate, after some days of relative improvement, the conversation syndrome increased. Then the second stage was begun. Second stage, during the narcoanalysis, an injection was dosed for deep sleep. The patient was moved to a different setting and transferred to another section where she was to be given electroconvulsive therapy without any new contact with the former psychotherapist. To arrive at the confusional stage as quickly as possible, the first period, mental home, Melu, with separate rooms, was substituted for the set in which many other patients were around and which was very hospital-like. Practically speaking, if she had some bright intervals of consciousness during these first days, she could not have failed to note the vague notion of disease, as well as the very reassuring one of attentive care. Third stage, once the asthmatic, amnesiac, confusional stage had been obtained, the patient was giving insulin, shock therapy, the aim of which was to put her upon and start to her recovery of consciousness in the very primitive situation of mother-child relations, spoon feeding, hygiene care, first words, the awareness of the orderlies faced upon waking from the insulin is in these conditions objectively set on the same plane of maternal confusion, in which one comes into the world. The primary and secondary identification processes had to be closed, monitored by a new psychotherapist who, moreover, acted indirectly this time, essentially through the means of the institution, on the mode akin to that in which the infant lives the presence of the father within the family. For that matter, these interhuman identifications are not unique. A social process is involved, the learning of names and identifications of objects through the intermediary of others. Our patient experienced her return to consciousness around several complexual nods, which her objective and verbal contact made explicit each time. And each time she, quote, went beyond the stage within the direct collaboration of the ward matron, and with the psychotherapist, who was at once distant and present. There was naturally a period of infantile amazement, in which all was beautiful and a game, in which she obeyed out of duty, a period in which personal inquiry faced with the world is undertaken, with the help of one's friend and accomplices, and the other parents and staff. Then she was 7 years old, and her mother was pregnant. She stated she had no need of another brother, the one precisely who committed suicide. Quote, I would love my father more, she said, to Mrs. X, a childhood friend. False recognition of an orderly, it seemed. Had he not put so many children into the world? Then her ideas of marriage received. I am 20. What are all those girls doing? What are all those girls there doing? They ought to get married like me. She integrated quite smoothly into the collective life of the workshop. She did not yet know that she was a sister. When finally she came to realize this, it did not stop her from accepting to take part in a play on the hospital stage with her ward. The role she chose was nonetheless very significant. Namely, she worked as a typist, just as she did upon entering the convent. She had been fired owing to her character, pride, etc. But this rehired in spirit of her character because no one better could be found and because she'd learnt to behave differently. Little by little, the rectification of her awareness of the situation became complete. I am sorry. I really was ill. The other day I spoke to you as if you were Miss X from 20 years ago, when my brother was born. We had no need of him. Now I should not be having the same ideas. This conversation I had with her. We spoiled him so much that he was poorly brought up. I'm embarrassed. I was indeed told that I was ill, but I didn't believe it. It's very good here. If I relapse one day, it is hereditary in our family. I wouldn't hesitate to return for a second time. She spoke and busied herself with concrete problems of her community, above all with our sisters' orderlies, and sometimes with us. Her behavior became entirely normal, and no signs of deterioration remained. She returned to her community and quickly adapted to it. Her hospitalization with us lasted a total of 3 months. During a 5 days of annihilation treatment, she had 17 electroshocks. She underwent 40 sessions of insulin shock therapy for 40 days of managed institutional therapy. So it worked for her. Inductions of electroconvulsive therapy within institutional therapies. Francois Torisco and Franz Fanon, St. Albans, July 1953. Nowadays, it seems that our extensive share experience means we do not need to hold back against the taboo surrounding electroconvulsive therapy. Not holding back does not mean not hesitating, not weighing up the pros and cons on each occasions. Electroconvulsive therapy can be legitimate only in terms of efficacy. Henceforth, the simultaneously scientific and human problem consists of specifying the indications as carefully as possible, as well as the technical conditions of putting them into action. This is what we aim to do as regards to annihilation method. Shock therapies have doubtless been abused. So before there can be any suggestions of engaging in treatment using many frequent electroshocks with little interruptions, the level of vigilant prudence and of self-criticism must be especially high. Prudence and vigilance are already essential for simple electroshock, which are, as an exception, able they are to provoke irreversible lesions and death. The utility of annihilation treatment for agitation is often spoken about, and yet agitation has been inefficiently specified or described from the semiological point of view. A common impression, unfortunately all too correct, is the repeat electroshock are sometimes performed out of convenience or, in the best cases, as a symptomatic medication for agitation, as if agitation was behavior with a unequivocal cause. It appears, however, that these states can be overcome with less dangerous and perhaps more effective therapeutic conducts. It is in its negative aspect, the history of benign annihilation overlaps with that of, leucotomy.
I'm not sure.
Not lobotomy. Leucotomy. Just kidding. Oh, it's an you weirdo. Come on, hey.
Leucotomy.
I was right, leuconomy. It's an obsolete psychosurgical procedure that involves severing nerves pathways in the brain's frontal lobe. And this parallel has been taken as far as to suggest an identity as regards efficacy, indication, and even curative or lesional mechanisms. However, it is well known that Sargent has contested this claim. Notwithstanding the comparison of useful in allowing us to note some common dangerous or negative aspects in the first place, the possibilities of establishing using each of these methods, I state that Bordner considered as a Pulitz frontal syndrome, sometimes definitive. Secondly, for each method, the problem which with indications extend between two poles that do nothing to lessen the astonishment of our hesitation. On the one hand, there is a claim as to the usefulness of leucotomy and annihilation for a series of disorders, minor as it were, but persistent ones, such as obsessive disorders, whose genetic etiology is easily omitted. We see this especially in the works of Benai and Carletia, and such was Agzi Monzin, can't say it, initial opinions of leucotomy. However, Stengel, Mueller, Jones, etc. all argue against this position. Mario, Barbie, and Goldenberg elaborate a more nuanced position, believing in the efficacy of annihilation for serious neurosis that began in the Middle age, and in its dangerous inefficiency in neurosis and puberty. On the other hand, however, these major therapies are always presented as an ultimate remedy in chronic, desperate, or complicated cases in which post-therapeutic deficient disorders are deemed a minor trouble as compared with the development of the illness towards Viescina or dementia. Granting that both types of indications are founded, it is possible to decide logically in each concrete cases. Hello. Oh, there's a hello. How can these two extreme poles be related? A therapy for simple and acute cases of a therapy for desperate ones. In our view, the only possible link is essentially constituted by the notion of personality development, or if you will, the neurotic content being manifested as the leading syndrome, rather in the framework of classic neurosis, or in that the certain psychosis. This is how, in many clinical pictures of psychosis, the structure of a new personality, which is conditioned by diverse processes, is filled with human psychological and neurotic manifestations. The language, okay, real quick, I'm going to make sure, remember 297, just real quick, 297. All right, we're good. 297. There we go. The language, the engagement of or compensatory behavior or stereotypes are often authentically neurotic, although psychosis can have conditioned them. We know that many chronic cases owe that chronicity precisely only in their own personalities and not to their illnesses. This is the case with facet psychosis, that a morbid mental persistence. It is also the case with most delusional stabilization. This is the problem of attitudes or of strongly fixed and conditioned reactional behaviors. But at this point, precisely the majority of authors advise caution. And we ask whether that caution does not reflect a very frequent theoretical basis concerning the fixity of character, the fixity of so-called constitutions, and implacable progress of pathological developments in the personality, in which the notion of paranoia is the extreme example. According to the author, the issue concerns the classical contradictions of annihilation therapy. One is urged to beware, since, for example, will the patient be not undertake new dissenting moves faced with possible memory disorders? In a word, does this attitude not hide the arrogance, the ignorance about the dynamism of personality, as psychoanalysis has revealed it to us, and also a material inability to apply these therapies within a hospital setting, especially set up to reconstruct the personality? We know of only one attempt to propose electroconvulsive therapy as part of a more general psychotherapy, namely Barbie and Goldenberg's, in a paper delivered at the 1950 Congress. They detail the ward's organization, the precaution taken to isolate, and the technical details of the psychotherapy aided by recording of the patient's statements. This seems to us of highest importance. Our method, different in the details, nonetheless connects with their foremost intentions. Otherwise said, electroconvulsivity theory can be effected within the institutional and psychotherapeutic framework. We do not adopt the recording practice, although this psychotherapeutic method is very good in the, oh my gosh, the psychology. Are you guys asleep?
I'm almost asleep.
Told you, I knew it.
Yep, I'm trying to stay awake. I'm very sorry, but I can't even keep track of where we're at anymore.
Oh my god, I have to watch another video. Shushagagi? What? It means the guidance to the soul. In many hysterical behaviors, as Mira has shown through the use of films. In addition, it is the method that connects with explicative psychopathologies, which are the utmost usefulness at the end of the procedure, or in certain dementias, in the process of encapsulating themselves. However, this psychocanalical method, applied after repeated shocks, does not take account of the process of disillusion reconstructions of the personality, which takes place in broad stages, as we saw in the example we reported earlier. It can be used as a complementary, not an essential fashion. In this case, what appears essential are the interhuman encounters and the practical activities in which the patient gets involved during the process of rediscovery of the ego and the world, including, naturally, the phantasmic stages that the milieu enables him or her in clinging to. Now, these fantasies have the same structure as the psychoanalytic fantasies, but as de Monzon so well put it in the field of institutional therapy, it is the real of the hospital that incarnates, supports, and resolves them. The doctor and the material and human plasticity of the ward must be adapted to these investments and must facilitate their overcoming. This is why the organization of the life group in which the patient is placed must be ready to involve any parallel with the reconstruction of the patient's ego and world. This is only possible by integrating the workshop together with the collective and spontaneous life of the hospital. Hence, the ergotherapy factors, the gymnastic motor, ergotherapy are ill-suited to facilitate these curative investments. Our 9 cases attest that the major indications for annihilation, which are not far from taking to be unique dictations, are precisely serious neurosis, in particular those that have stabilized from middle age and age when analytic elementary psychotherapy, deconditioning is no longer possible. But among these neuroses, we must include a large number of arrested delusional developments. Indeed, genuine oh my gosh, don't know this word. Paranosis? I don't know how to say it. I have the dream team falling asleep here. Dream team. Just kidding. No funny, I guess. No funny. Oh yeah, okay, hold on. Here it is. An irrational, often intense feeling that others are out of harm, exploiting, or considered against. Okay, let's do this.
Paranoia.
It's paranoias. Because the disorder's mechanism and meanings are identical in both cases, we thus treat the delusions of jealousy, not erotomanus, a paranoid hypochondria, an improved or cured socially some hallucinatory psychosis, to the extent that most apparent disorders corresponded to the reaction of the morbid personality. Some of these delusions is claimed quickly elapse. One of our patients, who besides had not had the benefit of preparatory psychotherapy except in the erroneous form of psychodrama, has been out for more than 2 years and has returned to her position as public servant in the central administration. Concerning a case of delusion, passionate, hallucinatory states and hallucinations returned, but not the delusion. The patient works and occupies herself at home. In the course of one of our visits, the husband, whom had believed she was totally cured, showed surprise that this unexpected avowal of her hallucinations. 3 years of experimentation evidently seemed inefficient, but this experimentation is encouraging, especially as no complications have arisen. In all patients, the psychoorganic syndrome totally regressed, as a case in point. Okay, here we go. Last page. We thought that the delusional disorders of a 60-year-old patient and erotomatic presented traits of presenile deterioration. What is more, the test confirmed the deterioration well after the annihilation treatment. This patient took to the stage and played the roles for memory, whereas prior to the treatment, she had already performed by constantly consulting a prompt book. Treating patients using this approach, we insist, necessitates granting the greatest importance to hospital arrangements, to the classification and grouping of patients, as well as the concomitant establishment of group therapies, the coexistence of the workshop and wards and the social life of the entire hospital is just the essential as the stage of active interventionist analysis preceding the treatment. Outside the possibility of such therapeutic linkages, the benign cure appears to us a complete nonsense. If simple electroshock can be interpreted, as Coretti believes, as a defense process, as a process of diasympathetic reactivation, or as the stress his collaborators, M. Martinetto, first and foremost, has shown that this is not the case with repeated electroshock. Not even the biological syndrome any longer corresponds to Sallé's alarm syndrome. On the contrary, the biological syndrome of the Benny-Kier corresponds to the exhaustion syndrome of the same author, a syndrome that Martinanati compares, moreover, to Dr. Morciri, confessional asthmatic syndrome with mesocephalic or pontabolibar impact. Henceforth, oh my gosh, Dalmes Marcetis opinions on disillusion reconstruction on the Provoso that it is understood in its concrete content, as comprising lived events within which psychological life is dramatized and appears, seems the most valid to us. Thus, understood disillusions reconstruction, while explaining the fortunate evolution of our cases, allows us to delimit the indications of electroconvulsivity therapy in the framework of institutional therapy. And then we'll stop here where it says discussion. Hold on a second.
I'm here.
I know. We're stopping at 299.
Yeah. It is long. It is a very long book.
Yeah, you did it. It's your fault.
Look, as I wrote earlier, I wrote this. Sorry, these kinds of notes I used to sleep to before exams. So they're comforting, and I just start falling asleep.
Well, I need you because we're reading this book for you, too, mostly.
I'm listening. That's why I'm up. I'm doing the foot massager thing, trying to get the pain out of my feet so I can focus.
It's like they're developing, like electroshock can work. It can be fine. I think there's just a lot of negative connotations surrounding it. You know what I mean? You know? Because it's been abused. You know, and it doesn't seem like he abused it. It seems like he made sure that the patient wanted to do that and that they're at the correct stage to do it. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
So it doesn't sound like Fanon, like, abused that. You know what I mean? I mean, you could disagree with the procedures and stuff, but it didn't seem like he abused it. You know?
Yeah, that's exactly what. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not a villain in this, that's for sure. I don't think. It doesn't seem like it. But anyways, it's 8 o'clock. I am going to go ahead and close it out. We stopped on page 299. And we'll start it up again tomorrow. Just, what, 400 more pages to go! Giving Joe a hard time, but it's not working. Fine, Joe. Don't say anything. All right, everybody. I'll see you all later. All right, and I'll talk